Hello, beautiful people, and welcome, hi, to a video on the banners. So I'm not gonna make a video on all the patch notes stuff. I will be doing it on the stream, and I'll consider uploading the VOD of this part of the stream as like an unlisted video on YouTube that you can access through a playlist. I'll think about it. I'll probably have information on what I've decided to do in the pinned comment of this video, so you can take a look at that if you're interested, and take the opportunity to like, subscribe, leave a nice comment. I don't know, man. Without further ado, let's get into the banners. The banners are most incredibly interesting. I use the word interesting a lot. I'm aware that I use it. I like the word interesting because you can use interesting to mean so many things. Interesting can be, this is surprisingly bad, or this is surprisingly good, or this does confirm my initial theory, so it's unsurprisingly good or bad. Interesting can literally mean anything. So I like using the word. Kinda pads the word count. It makes me sound smarter. But yeah, so this is probably one of the worst banners we've ever had. If I was a new player who wanted to get Cyno, I would be so fucking mad at this. But as a non-new player who already has C6 of most of the good 4 stars, I don't have C6 of these garbage characters. I don't even have C0 Kuki, and I don't have constellations on my Sayu, and obviously I don't have Candace yet. Kuki's a lot better now than she was before. I made a video on Kuki before we had news on her being on the banner because, well, Dory just came out, and Dory made me depressed, and yeah, so so I decided to make a video on Kuki instead, the better electro healer. I'm gonna get into the details of how she got better with Dendro in that video, so you can feel free to check it out when it comes. And if it's not out by the time this video's out, you can subscribe, and then you can see it when it comes out. But basically, she has some really solid teams because Hyper Bloom scales only with Elemental Mastery, which means that if you want to maximize your Hyper Bloom damage, you want to build a lot of Elemental Mastery, which means you're not building as much crit rate, you're not building as much damage percent, and that leads you to a situation where the base scalings of your kits don't matter as much because you don't have that much damage percent, you don't have that much attack, you don't have that much crit, you mostly have a lot of Elemental Mastery, which means that the difference in damage output between electro units that deal a lot of damage and electro units that don't deal a lot of damage becomes smaller. And when you have a smaller difference like that, then you start caring more about how practical the units are. And with Kuki, she consolidates healing, she has pretty good uptime on her E, so she's gained a lot of value and is most definitely one of the better options for Hyper Bloom teams. When it comes to Aggravate, she's not quite as good, but Aggravate teams often struggle to find a healer, to slot in a healer. Kuki's damage, while it's not great in Aggravate, is not completely terrible. She does get 5 electro applications on her burst, so she gets a decent amount of Aggravate. Her damage is basically all AoE, so you'll have situations where replacing Fischl with her won't be that much of a damage loss because Fischl is only single target, whereas Kuki's AoE. She's definitely not like a better option that's gonna make you clear faster, but the amount by which she makes you clear slower is a lot smaller in Dendro teams than it is in non-Dendro teams. And if that lets you get a healer in and you need a healer, then that can be worth it. So Kuki is actually a pretty okay unit now, but Sayu's not great. There's not that much of a reason to want an Animo healer because, yeah, you get your Animo healer, but you get VV, cool, that's nice. But Sayu has a lot of gameplay issues related to she gets cancelled out of her E very, very easily if you try to stay on it. And if you don't try to stay on it, the animation is incredibly long. She has really, really high energy requirements. Overall, you just end up with very frustrating gameplay pretty often, and you'd be better off using a different healer. It's not that she's bad, more so that I don't think I would ever use Kuki over other 4-star options if given the choice. She's nice for overall, that's cool. I think the most important thing is she doesn't really give you access to more teams, which means that she's not a good character for new players. Candace is just bad. Obviously, I'll have to do some more testing on her, and I'll do that when the patch comes out. But I am very much not hopeful. I'm very pessimistic when it comes to what to expect out of Candace. And she's most definitely not, enabling new teams for you. She is a Hydro application, so if you want to play a quote-unquote national team, but you only have Cyno and you don't have another Hydro unit, and you end up getting Candace, maybe you'd be able to use her in national instead of Cyno. You'd lose a lot of damage because Cyno's doing a lot of damage in those teams, but it would let you use Xingqiu on your other side, and Xingqiu is obviously a very valuable unit. I don't think she'll be very good. I don't think she'll be completely unusable, but I definitely don't think it's the kind of unit like you're happy with on a banner. Again though, like at the end of the day, every account is different and every player is different. Maybe you care about things that I don't care about. Maybe you just think her animations look cool, so you want to play her, and that's completely okay. But yeah, personally, right, for my account, I'm relatively happy with the banner, because like I said, I don't have Kuki still on my main account, and I don't have Sayu constellations, and I obviously don't have Kandaka, and most of the good 4-stars like Xingqiu, Beidou, Sucrose, Xiangling, I already have them at C6. So personally, this is like the best case scenario for me. But when it comes to like recommendations to increase the strength of your account, if you're a relatively new account and your account, the 4-stars are definitely not great. When it comes to the 5-stars, Cyno is going to be very mediocre, perfectly functional, perfectly adequate, but nothing more. Venti's always the same, where he's not a team building unit. He's like a cheat code, but it's a cheat code that only works in a specific sort of content. Do you want that cheat code? I don't know. Maybe you care about clearing your domains faster. Maybe you care about having your overworld experience be faster or more comfortable, whatever. In terms of like actually making your teams better, he doesn't do that though. So I don't think he's all that great on an account that doesn't have good teams yet, right? On a newer account. I will not be doing an Ask Zajev Venti edition number 2 because I don't think enough has changed since his last rerun. A little bit has changed. Basically, a lot of the Sumeru enemies are enemies against which Venti's burst works really well. The proportion of quote-unquote ventiable enemies versus unventiable enemies in Sumeru is better than in Inazuma, which is kind of what I was expecting. I don't think they'll ever want the Anemo Archon to be completely irrelevant, so I don't think they'll ever just stop making ventiable enemies. Venti is a very clear unit in what he does and what he brings to your account. If you want that, you can go for him, and if you don't, you shouldn't. But yeah, that's it for the character banners. The weapon banner is very... This might be the best weapon banner we've ever had. There are 2 weapons on this banner that are not great. Lion's Roar is fine, but it's not great. It's usable, and it can be good actually in a few teams. I personally use Lion's Roar on my Xingqiu relatively often when I play him in Taser or Sucrose Hyperbloom teams, where I generate a lot of energy, and I don't need Fav because he's kind of the only unit in my team that needs the energy that much, and so I end up playing him with Lion's Roar instead. But obviously, if you already have a 5-star sword, generally Lion's Roar is going to be worse than that 5-star sword. The new Claymore is pretty bad. What it does is it has an EM substat, and it basically gives the character that wears it flat attack based on how much EM they have, and it's 24% at R1, basically 25 a quarter, right? So if you have 1,000 EM, that's going to be 240, 250-ish attack. It also gives 30% of that to the rest of your team, so that's going to be an 80-ish attack to the rest of your team. So if you're a character that builds full EM for transformative reaction stuff, you can reach upwards of about 1,000, which means you can get about 240 attack on your character and 80 attack on the rest of your team. 80 attack will generally be the equivalent of somewhere between 7 and 12% attack percent, about 10 average, right? So it's the equivalent of about half a noblesse, and if you get it to R5, it would be the equivalent of about a noblesse, which isn't bad, but it's also not insane. And the main thing to remember about it is that on EM scaling characters, you don't actually want that attack all that much. And when I say EM scaling characters, I mean transformative scaling characters that are focused on Hyperbloom or Overload, stuff like that. Not characters that are focusing on Aggravate and Melt or Vape and all that. But because those characters, well, they don't have, if they are going for 1,000 EM, they don't have a lot of crit, they don't have a lot of damage percent, and so that flat attack isn't increasing their damage that much. If a character is doing non-transformative stuff, so if they are doing Melt, if they are doing Aggravate, then they will have damage percent, and they will have crit, but they won't have 1,000 EM. They'll be closer to somewhere between 200 and 500, depending on which character, depending on which buffs you have on your team. And so while they would like the attack, they're not getting as much. And then on top of that, they're not buffing the rest of your team for as much either. So the biggest issue is that the characters that can build the most EM don't want the attack percent buff that much. It's never bad, it still increases your damage, but it's not very significant. So it's kind of like a support weapon, but the buff that it gives is relatively minor, so it's pretty meh. But Lion's Roar and the new Claymore out of the way, Favonius Lance is like arguably the best 4-star weapon. It's useful on so many characters. It's useful on so many accounts. Personally, I have an R5 Fab Lance and an R3 Fab Lance, and I wish I had more. Fab Bow. It's very good on a few characters. Not as many characters as Fab Lance, so it doesn't end up being as valuable, but it's still like quite good on the characters that where you use it. And then Sac Frag is incredibly good for on-field sucrose stuff, and on-field sucrose is kind of broken. It's very good. Point being, you've got 3 very good 4-star weapons, 2 meh 4-star weapons, which kind of leads you into the conclusion that when it comes to 4 stars, you have something that's quite a bit better than average. You should never pull on a weapon banner for the 4 stars, but if you are going to be pulling for the 5 stars, it's better if the 4 stars are good than if the 4 stars are useless, right? I'm sure we can agree on that. And Favonius Warbow, Fab Lance, and Sac Frag, all 3 of these weapons are weapons where even if you have 5-star alternatives to them, you might want to use them anyways, because they're just that good, which is part of what makes a good standard banner weapon, right? Because if you're pulling on the standard banner, you're probably not a new player, like a new free-to-play player. If you are a new free-to-play player, I would not recommend pulling on the weapon banner. But what that means is you probably already have a bunch of weapon options on your characters. So the best kind of 4-star weapons to have on a banner are weapons that you'll use even if you have a lot of good weapons already, which Fab Lance, Fab Bow, and Sac Frag are. But like I said, you should never pull on a weapon banner for the 4-star weapons, because there's no actual hard guarantee on which character you get, and there's 5 different options. The actual like odds that you get what you want in a given amount of Primo Gems is deceptively low. Like, it is relatively likely that you'll get the 5-star weapon you want before you get the 4-star weapon you want. So never pull if like there's only one 4-star that you really want. But let's talk about the 5 stars now. Elegy is probably the most versatile 5-star weapon in the game. I'd say that there's not a single account where Elegy is completely useless. That being said, it's also never going to be the biggest increase to your account. So what I mean by this is Elegy is by design a support weapon, which means that basically every time you would gain more damage out of pulling a 5-star weapon for your main source of damage than for your support. So if you only got the Primo Gems to go for like one 5-star weapon, Elegy is generally not the one I would recommend. But if you've been playing for a while, you've done a bunch of standard wishes, probably have a couple 5-star weapons from the standard banner. Maybe you have Skyward Harp, maybe you have a Jade Wing Spear. You have like decent 5-star weapons already. And sure, you don't have signatures, but they're still solid and they're not that far behind signature weapons on a lot of characters. Then Elegy starts gaining in value, because the gap between that Skyward Harp, for example, and Polar Star on your child isn't as big as the gap between like Rust and Polar Star. Point being, Elegy is not the weapon that, like, if you're a new player, that's the weapon you want, but it's basically a perfect second weapon on a banner. It's basically the perfect losing your 50-50 for the weapon banner. So I wouldn't recommend pulling on the banner for Elegy, but if you want the Staff of Scarlet Sands, this banner is probably going to be a better shot for you to get it, a better outcome for you to if you try to get it, than if you were to wait for a different Staff of Scarlet Sand banner down the line. Not by that much. Like, it's not the end of the world. If you don't have the Primo Gems, don't go for it. But if you do, you know, it's not a bad one to lose your 50-50 to. The Staff of Scarlet Sands is a pretty solid generalist weapon that also has that also happens to basically be best in slot by a decent amount for Cyno. It has low base attack, which means high substat, and it's a crit substat, which is good. So it's basically really good for Cyno and pretty solid for any EM scaling character. And even on non-EM scaling characters, it's still fine. Overall, a pretty solid weapon, nothing crazy. But yeah, I kind of want to nuance my stuff properly, because the weapon banner can be such a trap. And I don't want someone to like watch this video and be like, oh, I guess I gotta go for the weapon banner now. No, weapon banners in general are luxury in the sense that they're not gonna change your gameplay experience by adding a new dimension to it. They're gonna change your gameplay experience by making your numbers a little bit bigger. If that's what you want, that's okay. But do keep in mind that like clearing Abyss in like 50 seconds instead of 55 kind of doesn't make that big of a difference. Unless what you're trying to do is speedrunning and compete against others or against yourself. It's not going to be a significant like gameplay difference other than just maybe it'll make you feel good if you clear faster and if your damage damage is a little bit bigger. But as a general rule, keep in mind that weapon banners don't give you more different things. And most importantly, weapon banners aren't likable. A weapon doesn't have a personality. If you spend your primos on a weapon banner now, and then you don't have the primos for the, I don't know, maybe you really like Al-Haytham for his, I don't know, like, you think he's cool, you like his personality, you think he's edgy, I don't know. And then because you spend on the weapon banner, because you spend your primos on the weapon banner, you don't have the primos for him. The only way to get him is going to be to spend. That makes you more likely to spend. And even if you don't spend, you're going to regret having gotten that weapon. You're going to regret, in retrospect, spending primogems on the weapon banner instead of keeping them for the character you like. So if you're a player who's like motivated by what characters they like, what personalities they like, I would basically never recommend weapon banners because weapon banners don't have personalities. And then if you're a meta focus player, then it depends on what kind of meta focus player you are. Do you want to maximize your clear speed as much as possible? Then a weapon banner can be good for you, and this is one of the better ones, if not the best one for that. Or do you focus on meta because you like making your characters work, because you like playing a lot of different things, because you like playing the game, you just want to play more things, play more different characters, play more different teams? Weapon banners don't give you new teams to play. They don't give you new things to try. So I wouldn't recommend the weapon banner if that's the case. So, in conclusion, really, really bad character banner, pretty solid weapon banner. As usual, don't spend money on this shit game. And, yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to Cyno even if I don't think he'll be very good. I hope he'll be fun at least. Please be fun. But yeah, and thank you for watching. Bye, YouTube. Actually, wait, no, before that. YouTube. I have a shorts channel now and a TikTok, but if you're on YouTube, mostly a shorts channel. It's called Zajort77. Link will be in the description. It's also on my channel homepage. I posted a short yesterday that I was really proud of. I thought it was really funny and it fucking tanked. Nobody watched it. But it's really funny and you should watch it because it's funny. If you want to see more of me, but you don't use Twitch, you don't want to use Twitch, or you do use Twitch, but my schedule doesn't line up with yours, go subscribe to the Zajor's channel. If you use TikTok, you can follow me on TikTok at Zajeff77. And yeah, I hope you'll have a great rest of your day. Bye, YouTube.